Some mysteries remain buried for decades, hidden beneath layers of secrets, deception, and forgotten memories. But what if the past refuses to stay silent? What if, 20 years after a tragic disappearance, a father comes face to face with the impossible? A woman identical to his lost daughter. But could it really be her? Or is the truth far more complex than it seems? As he embarks on a journey of shocking revelations, betrayals, and heartbreaking choices, nothing will prepare him for what he is about to uncover. Stay until the end, because this story will leave you speechless. Don't forget to subscribe and comment below where you're watching from. The storm arrived like an omen, sweeping through the city with an unforgiving force. The sky, once painted in the soft hues of dusk, had darkened into a suffocating gray, and the wind howled through the streets, rattling windows and sending leaves spiraling into the air. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a warning of what was to come. Rain poured down in relentless sheets, soaking the pavement, turning roads slick and dangerous. Inside a modest suburban home, Michael Carter stood by the window, watching the chaos unfold outside. He tightened his jaw, his fingers drumming anxiously against the wooden sill. He had always hated storms. Something about their unpredictability, the way they could destroy without warning. But tonight, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one raging inside his home. "You're never here, Michael." Sarah's voice cut through the sound of rain pelting the roof. She stood in the dimly lit living room, her arms crossed, frustration lining her face. "Every day it's work, work, work. Do you even see what this is doing to Lily?" Michael turned from the window, exhaling sharply. "I'm doing this for us, for her. You think I don't care?" Sarah shook her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You say that, but when was the last time you really spent time with her? She waits for you every night. She sits by the door, hoping you'll walk in and say, 'Let's play a game, Lily.' But you don't. And I have to watch her little heart break every single night." A pang of guilt struck Michael's chest, but he pushed it down. He had a career to maintain, responsibilities to handle. "I'm trying to build something for us, Sarah. It's not easy. And what's the point if we lose her in the process?" Michael ran a hand through his damp hair. He wanted to argue, but deep down he knew she was right. Lily, their 8-year-old daughter, was the brightest part of their lives. Yet he had been too busy to notice the way she longed for him. A soft, hesitant voice broke through the tension. "Mom? Dad?" Both parents turned to see Lily standing in the hallway, her blue eyes wide, her small hands clutching the hem of her dress. She had been listening. Sarah immediately softened, kneeling to Lily's level. "Hey, sweetheart, I was thinking we could go to church for evening prayers. Would you like that?" Lily nodded. "Can Daddy come too?" Michael hesitated. Sarah looked up at him, her expression pleading. This was his chance, his moment to show up for his daughter. But his phone buzzed, a call from work. He took one glance at it, then at Lily, then at Sarah. "I'll be here when you get back," he promised. Disappointment flickered across Lily's face, but she nodded. Sarah didn't say anything. She just took their daughter's hand and led her out the door into the storm. It was the last time Michael would ever see his daughter the way he knew her. The night unfolded like a cruel trick of fate. Sarah and Lily arrived at the church, shaking off the rain from their coats as they stepped inside the warm glow of candlelight. The scent of incense filled the air, and the soft hum of prayers echoed off the walls. Lily held her mother's hand tightly as they walked toward the pews. But then, just before they sat down, she tugged on Sarah's sleeve. "Mom, can I go to the restroom?" Sarah hesitated. She didn't like Lily going alone, especially with the storm outside. But they were in a church, a place of safety. She scanned the dimly lit hallway that led to the restrooms. It was empty. "Okay, sweetheart, but come right back. Don't talk to anyone. Okay?" Lily nodded, flashing a small, innocent smile before skipping off toward the hallway. Sarah watched her go. Minutes passed, then more. She shifted in her seat, craning her neck to look toward the hallway. No sign of Lily. A strange sense of unease settled in her stomach. She stood up, excusing herself as she made her way toward the restroom. She pushed the door open, calling softly, "Lily!" Silence. Her pulse quickened. She checked each stall, her hands trembling as she pushed the doors open one by one. Empty. Panic set in. She rushed back to the main church area, her voice rising. Did anyone see a little girl with blonde hair? About this tall. Heads turned, murmurs spread, but the answer was the same everywhere. No one had seen Lily. Sarah's breath came in short gasps. She ran outside into the storm, calling her daughter's name over and over, her voice breaking with each cry. Rain soaked her hair, clung to her skin, but she didn't care. She searched the streets, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. Where was she? How could she have vanished in a matter of minutes? The church staff called the police. Michael arrived minutes later, drenched from the rain. His face pale as he saw his wife sobbing, her hands gripping her hair in despair. "She's gone, Michael," Sarah choked out. "She's gone." The next days were a blur of police reports, interviews, and endless searches. Every inch of the church and surrounding areas was scoured, every security camera reviewed, but it was as if Lily had disappeared into thin air. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Sarah deteriorated. The weight of guilt crushed her, eating away at her until she was nothing more than a hollow version of herself. Her health declined rapidly. She barely spoke, barely ate. Michael tried to hold everything together, tried to believe that Lily was still out there. But without answers, hope began to slip through his fingers like sand. Then, one morning, Sarah didn't wake up. The doctors called it a combination of illness, stress, and heartbreak. Michael called it something else. He had lost them both. Years passed. 10 long, agonizing years. Michael searched relentlessly at first, refusing to believe that Lily was gone. But time had a way of dulling even the sharpest pain. Eventually, he stopped looking. Until one fateful night, Michael was walking home late from work, taking a shortcut through a dimly lit alley when he saw something that made his breath catch in his throat. Through the glowing window of a nightclub, standing behind the bar, was a young woman. She was serving drinks, laughing softly as she wiped down the counter. But it wasn't just any woman. She had the same blue eyes, the same blonde hair, the same small dimple in her left cheek. Michael's heart pounded violently in his chest. Could it be? Was it really her? He stepped closer, his fingers gripping the cold metal of the railing as he stared in disbelief. The woman turned slightly, her face catching the light. And then, as if fate had orchestrated the moment, she looked up, her eyes locking with his through the glass. For a second, time stood still. Michael whispered, barely breathing, "Lily." Michael's breath caught in his throat as his eyes remained locked on the young woman behind the glass. His heart pounded so violently that he could feel it echoing in his ears. He knew that face. Every detail, every expression, every little movement. It was burned into his memory. He had spent the last 20 years haunted by the image of his daughter, by the way her little hands used to cling to him, by the soft way she used to say, "Good night, Daddy." And now, standing just a few feet away, separated only by a pane of glass, was a woman who looked exactly like Lily, grown up, alive, and utterly unaware of his existence. Michael took an unsteady step forward, pressing his hand against the cold metal railing in front of the nightclub. His fingers trembled as he tried to steady himself. Was this real, or was his mind playing a cruel trick on him? He had given up hope years ago, had forced himself to accept that Lily was gone. But this was impossible. Inside the dimly lit nightclub, the woman, Anna, according to the name tag pinned to her black blouse, continued working, completely unaware of the storm unraveling in Michael's chest. She moved with effortless grace, pouring drinks, laughing softly as she exchanged words with a customer. He watched as she tucked a loose strand of blonde hair behind her ear, her blue eyes shining under the dim golden lights. Those eyes, they were Lily's. Michael felt his legs move before his mind could process the decision. He was pushing through the doors of the club, stepping inside as the heavy bass of music thrummed against his chest. The scent of liquor and perfume filled the air, a stark contrast to the cold rain outside. He barely noticed the flashing lights, the chatter of the people around him. His entire focus was on her. He maneuvered through the crowd, his breath quickening with each step. As he approached the bar, the young woman turned to grab a bottle from the shelf behind her, completely unaware of his presence. Michael's voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. Lily. The name left his lips before he could stop himself. The woman, Anna, froze for half a second. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Michael saw it. He saw the way her fingers hesitated as she reached for the bottle, the way her shoulders tensed ever so slightly. Then, as if nothing had happened, she turned back around, smiling politely. "What can I get you?" Her voice was smooth, practiced. It was the voice of someone used to dealing with strangers. Michael's world tilted. It was the same voice. It had matured, deepened slightly with age, but it was unmistakable. It was her. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his thoughts. "Lily, it's you." Anna's polite smile faltered, just for a second, before she quickly masked it with indifference. "I think you've got the wrong person." "No," Michael insisted, his voice thick with emotion. "It's you. I know it's you." Anna's brows knit together in confusion, a flicker of unease passing through her blue eyes. "Sir, I think you're mistaken. My name is Anna Whitmore." Michael shook his head. No, that's not possible. Your name is Lily. Lily Carter." She took a cautious step back. "I don't know who that is." Michael's chest tightened. He could feel the weight of 20 years of grief pressing down on him, suffocating him. "You disappeared," he whispered, his voice breaking. 20 years ago. You were 8 years old. We looked for you. Your mother, she never stopped looking for you. And then she was gone too." For the first time, something flickered in Anna's eyes. A brief, fleeting moment of recognition, of something buried deep within her. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. "I think you should leave," she said, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. "I don't know you." Michael felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. He had imagined this moment for so long. He had pictured finding her, holding her, telling her that he never gave up. But this was worse than any nightmare. She was standing in front of him, alive, breathing, yet she had no idea who he was. Desperation clawed at his chest. "Please," he whispered, his voice shaking. Just listen to me. Let me talk to you." Anna's expression wavered for a moment, as if she were battling something inside of her. But before she could respond, a man stepped up beside her. He was tall, sharply dressed, his expression cool and unreadable. "Is there a problem here?" the man asked, his voice calm but firm. Anna turned to him, her expression immediately shifting to something neutral. "No, Mr. Callahan. Everything's fine." Michael's jaw clenched. He didn't know who this man was, but the way he stood protectively beside Anna made his stomach twist. Mr. Callahan turned his gaze to Michael, his eyes sharp and assessing. "I think it's time for you to leave, sir." Michael's heart pounded. He wanted to fight, to argue, to demand answers. But Anna, Lily, was looking at him with something that resembled fear. This wasn't the time. Without another word, Michael turned and walked out of the nightclub, his hands clenched into fists. The cold air hit him like a slap as he stepped outside, but it did nothing to clear the fog in his mind. That was her. That was Lily. She was alive, but she didn't know who she was. Or worse, she did, and she had been told to forget. Michael inhaled deeply, trying to steady himself. He wasn't giving up. Not this time. As he walked away from the nightclub, he didn't notice the way Anna was watching him through the window, her fingers lightly touching the name tag on her blouse. She didn't know why, but something about that man felt familiar. Michael couldn't sleep that night. His mind was a storm, relentless and unforgiving, pulling him deeper into the abyss of uncertainty. The image of her, Lily Anna, was burned into his thoughts. The way she had looked at him, the brief flicker of recognition in her eyes before it vanished. He knew his daughter. He knew that face, those eyes, the small dimple in her left cheek when she pressed her lips together. But she hadn't known him, or at least she had pretended not to. He sat in his dimly lit apartment, staring at the glass of untouched whiskey on the table, his hands gripping the arms of his chair as if letting go would send him spiraling. He had stopped drinking years ago, after Sarah's death, but tonight the temptation was unbearable. Instead, he grabbed his phone, scrolling through old photos, the ones he could never bring himself to delete. A picture of Lily at 6 years old, her blonde curls tied into pigtails, laughing as she held onto his arm. Another of her 7th birthday, blowing out the candles on a cake shaped like a carousel. The last picture he had of her before she disappeared. A candid moment in the backyard, where she had turned to smile at him just as he snapped the photo. Michael exhaled sharply, running a hand through his graying hair. He had spent the last decade learning how to live with the pain, how to move forward without closure. But now that closure felt within reach, just beyond his fingertips. He wasn't letting go. The next day, Michael found himself outside the nightclub once again, watching from a distance as Anna arrived for her shift. She walked with a confidence that was unfamiliar to him, dressed in dark jeans and a sleek black blouse, her hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She was different from the little girl he remembered, but she was still her, and he wasn't the only one watching. Michael's eyes landed on a figure standing near the alley beside the club. A man in a gray coat, his hands stuffed in his pockets, observing the entrance with a sharp, calculating gaze. The moment Anna disappeared inside, the man turned and walked away, melting into the crowd. Michael's stomach twisted. Someone else was keeping an eye on her. He didn't know if that terrified him or reassured him. Determined, he made his way inside the club, slipping into the dimly lit space just as Anna stepped behind the bar. He didn't approach her immediately. Instead, he found a seat in the farthest corner, watching as she moved effortlessly through her routine. She smiled at customers, nodded along to conversations, poured drinks with precision. She had a life here, a routine, a name that wasn't hers. Who had given it to her? Minutes passed, then an hour. Then finally, she saw him. Anna stilled for a fraction of a second when her eyes met his across the room. She swallowed, her fingers tightening around the glass she was holding before she quickly looked away, pretending to be unfazed. But he saw it. She knew. She turned and spoke to a coworker, whispering something before slipping through a side door that led to the employees' area. Michael didn't hesitate. He rose from his seat, moving quickly, weaving through the tables and past the bar. The side door was slightly ajar, leading into a narrow hallway illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights. "Lily," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She was there, standing at the end of the hallway, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. "It's Anna," she corrected. Her voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something fragile. Michael took a slow step closer. "No, it's not." She exhaled through her nose, shaking her head. "I don't know who you think I am, but You hesitated," he interrupted, his voice thick with emotion. "Last night, when I said your name, I saw it in your face. You know me." Anna's jaw tightened. "You're mistaken." "Then look me in the eyes and tell me I'm wrong," Michael challenged. She held his gaze. He saw the flicker of hesitation, the way her throat bobbed as she swallowed. But she squared her shoulders. "You're wrong," she said. The words hit him like a punch to the chest. But she didn't leave. She didn't run. Michael took another step, his voice gentler now. "If you really believe that, then tell me, where did you grow up?" Anna's breath hitched. She stopped. Her lips parted, her brows furrowed. She was struggling. Michael felt his heart race. "Tell me your childhood memories," he pressed. "Tell me your parents' names. Tell me something, anything, from before you were 10. Anna's fingers twitched at her sides. She blinked rapidly as if trying to grasp onto something in her mind, but it was just out of reach. She didn't have the answers. Finally, she forced a small, rehearsed smile. "I was raised in California, by my parents, Daniel and Claire Whitmore." Michael's blood ran cold. There was no hesitation this time. The words came out smoothly, practiced. Too practiced. He took a deep breath, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "Who told you that?" Anna flinched. It was subtle, but he caught it. "Excuse me?" Michael stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't remember, do you? You don't remember your childhood because someone gave you a new one." Her breathing grew uneven. Michael shook his head. "And they told you not to question it." Anna's mask slipped for a brief moment, just enough for him to see the crack beneath the surface. She took a step back, wrapping her arms around herself as if shielding herself from the truth. Then she turned on her heel. "I have to get back to work." "Wait," Michael called out, desperation creeping into his voice. "Please don't shut me out. She didn't turn back. She disappeared through the doorway, leaving him standing in the empty hallway, his heart pounding. Michael exhaled sharply, his mind spinning. Someone had taken her. Someone had erased her past, rewritten her history, and molded her into someone else. And they had done it so well that she didn't even realize it. Michael clenched his jaw. He had spent the last decade believing he had lost his daughter forever. But she was standing right in front of him. And now he had a new mission. He wasn't going to let them take her from him again. Michael stood frozen in the empty hallway, the faint sound of music and chatter from the club filtering through the walls. His chest felt tight, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. Someone had taken her. Someone had erased her past, buried her memories, and convinced her that she was someone else. But why? And who? He had spent years mourning a daughter he thought was gone forever. And now that she was standing right in front of him, she didn't even know who he was. He wasn't going to let this go. Taking a deep breath, he pushed through the side door back into the club. Anna Lily was already behind the bar again, her expression unreadable as she handed a drink to a customer. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him, but he saw the way her fingers trembled slightly as she set the glass down. She was affected by their conversation. That meant there was hope. Michael didn't stay. He knew that pushing her too hard, too fast, would only drive her further away. Instead, he turned and left the club, stepping out into the cold night air. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still slick, reflecting the neon lights from the nearby signs. His hands clenched into fists. He needed answers, and he knew exactly where to start. Michael sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel as he stared at the dimly lit building across the street. The Whitmore Foundation for Children, a place he had never heard of until he had started digging into the name Anna Whitmore. A non-profit organization that specialized in child welfare services, adoption programs, and, most concerningly, identity protection for minors in unstable circumstances. He had spent the last few hours researching everything he could about it. On the surface, it was just another charity. But the deeper he looked, the more inconsistencies he found. Reports of missing records, legal loopholes, adoption cases where children's birth certificates had been altered or completely erased. And then, the most damning piece of information. The foundation had been founded exactly 20 years ago. The same year Lily disappeared. Michael's stomach churned. It wasn't proof, not yet. But it was too much of a coincidence to ignore. He took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. Inside, the building was eerily quiet. The reception area was dimly lit, with sleek, modern furniture and a desk where a young woman sat, typing on a computer. She barely looked up when he approached. "Good evening," she said in a professional tone. "How can I help you?" Michael forced a polite smile. "I'm looking for information on a past adoption case. A girl named Lily Carter." The receptionist's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. Then she looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "I'm sorry, but we don't release private adoption records without proper authorization." Michael nodded as if expecting the response. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small envelope. "I understand, but I think you'll find this interesting." He slid the envelope across the desk. Inside was a photograph. A grainy security still from the nightclub showing Anna Lily behind the bar. The receptionist's face paled slightly. Michael leaned in. "I think you know who she is." For a moment, the woman didn't speak. Then she swallowed, glancing around as if making sure no one was watching. "I can't help you," she whispered, her voice tight. "You shouldn't be here." Michael's pulse quickened. "Why not?" She hesitated, then leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Because if they find out you're asking questions, they'll make sure you stop." Michael felt a chill creep down his spine. "Who?" The woman straightened, her professional mask snapping back into place. "I'm sorry, sir. If you have any legal inquiries, you'll need to file a formal request." Michael opened his mouth to argue, but she was already looking back at her computer, her hands shaking slightly as she resumed typing. The conversation was over, but he had gotten exactly what he needed. Someone didn't want him asking questions, which meant he was getting closer to the truth. Michael didn't sleep that night. He sat in his apartment, surrounded by scattered papers, printouts, and old photographs. The Whitmore Foundation wasn't just a charity, it was a cover, a system designed to erase and rebuild identities. And Lily Anna had been one of their cases. The question was, why? Who had taken her? And why had they gone to such extreme lengths to erase her past? And then there was the other question. If Lily had been given a new life, a new family, where were they? Michael grabbed his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. After 3 rings, a deep, familiar voice answered. "This is Harrison." Michael exhaled. "I need your help." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Michael, it's been 10 years. I know, but I found her." Silence. Then, "What?" "I found Lily." Harrison, the retired detective who had worked Lily's case all those years ago, didn't speak for a long moment. When he finally did, his voice was careful. "Are you sure?" Michael ran a hand over his face. "She doesn't remember me. She doesn't remember anything." Harrison cursed under his breath. "Where is she?" "She works at a nightclub. She goes by Anna Whitmore." There was another pause. Then Harrison's voice hardened. "Whitmore, you know what that means, right?" Michael closed his eyes. "Yeah." Harrison sighed. "Meet me tomorrow morning. We need to talk." Michael hung up, his mind racing. He had spent years trying to forget, trying to move on. But now, for the first time in a decade, he had something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. Hope. The next morning, Michael met Harrison at a small diner on the outskirts of town. The older man looked rougher than before. His once black hair was now streaked with gray, his face more lined with age. But his sharp, calculating eyes hadn't changed. He leaned back in his chair, watching Michael carefully. "Tell me everything." Michael did. Every detail. From the moment he saw her in the club to the way she had hesitated when he called her name. When he finished, Harrison exhaled slowly. "If she's part of the Whitmore system, then it's bad." Michael frowned. "Why?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "Because Whitmore doesn't just erase identities. They replace them. If Lily was put through their program, then whoever raised her. They weren't just her guardians." He paused, his expression grim. "They were told to make sure she never remembered." Michael's stomach twisted. Who would do that? And why take her in the first place? Harrison hesitated, then shook his head. "I don't know, but I know one thing." Michael leaned in. Harrison's voice was low, deadly serious. "If Whitmore took her, they're not going to let you take her back." Michael swallowed hard, but he had already made up his mind. He didn't care who they were. He didn't care what they had done. He was getting his daughter back. Michael left the diner with a weight heavier than before pressing against his chest. Harrison's words echoed in his mind. If Whitmore took her, they're not going to let you take her back. But the thing that terrified him most wasn't what Whitmore had done. It was what they were still doing. Lily, Anna, had no memory of him, no recollection of her past. If what Harrison said was true, then someone had ensured she wouldn't remember. And if she started remembering now, what would happen to her? Michael drove aimlessly through the city, the buildings passing in a blur. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the skyline, but he didn't see it. His mind was too tangled, too full of questions without answers. He needed to talk to her. Not in a crowded bar, not with someone watching. He needed to talk to her somewhere safe, somewhere she could think, where she could remember. But how did you convince someone to remember a life they didn't even know they had? His grip tightened on the steering wheel. He wasn't going to lose her again. Anna Whitmore sat in the small apartment she had called home for the past 3 years, staring at the glass of water in her hands. Her fingers traced the rim absent-mindedly, her mind somewhere else, somewhere far away. She hadn't been able to focus all day. Her conversation with the stranger, Michael Carter, kept replaying in her head. The way he had looked at her, the desperation in his voice, the way he had called her Lily as if it was the only name that had ever belonged to her. She shouldn't have let it get to her, but it had, because when he had asked her to remember, she hadn't been able to. Her childhood memories had always been hazy. It wasn't something she questioned before. She had assumed it was normal, that people didn't always remember every detail of their early years. But now, as she searched her mind, she realized something unsettling. Her first memory was at 10 years old. Not a moment before. Nothing from when she was 8. Nothing from when she was 7. Just blankness. She swallowed hard. She had a family. She had been raised by good people, Daniel and Claire Whitmore. They had given her everything. A home, love, safety. Hadn't they? Anna shook her head, trying to dispel the growing unease in her chest. She had to let it go. Michael was wrong. He had to be. A knock at her door made her jump. She turned, hesitating. No one ever came to her apartment unannounced. Slowly, she stood and walked to the door, pressing her ear against it. Who is it? A pause. Then, it's me, Michael. Anna exhaled sharply, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She should tell him to leave. She should ignore him. Instead, she opened the door. Michael stood there, his expression guarded, his eyes searching hers as if he were trying to see inside her soul. Can we talk? Anna hesitated. Every logical part of her told her to say no. But there was something else, something deep inside her, pulling at her, telling her to listen. She stepped aside. Michael entered, glancing around the apartment. It was small but clean, simple, with very little decoration, almost as if she hadn't fully settled in. Nice place, he said quietly. Anna crossed her arms. You shouldn't be here. I know, he admitted, but I had to come. She looked at him warily. Why? Michael took a deep breath. Because I need you to listen to me, and I need you to tell me the truth. Her stomach twisted. About what? About your past. Anna clenched her jaw. I already told you. Michael took a step closer. Tell me the name of your elementary school. She opened her mouth, then hesitated. Michael watched her carefully. Tell me your best friend's name when you were 9. A flicker of frustration crossed her face. Why does that matter? Because you can't answer it. Anna's breath caught. You don't remember, do you? Michael pressed. Not just me. Not just your name. You don't remember anything from before you were 10 years old. Anna took a step back. That's ridiculous. Then prove me wrong. Silence. Michael swallowed hard. They did this to you, he whispered. Whoever took you, whoever gave you a new life, they didn't just give you a new name. They erased you. They made sure you wouldn't remember. Anna's chest tightened. That doesn't make any sense. Michael exhaled. I know it doesn't, but it's the truth. Anna shook her head, running a hand through her hair. No, I have a family. I grew up with them. They're good people. Michael's jaw clenched. Then why won't they talk to me? Anna's breath hitched. Michael's voice softened. If they have nothing to hide, then why won't they tell me where you came from? Anna's head spun. None of this was possible. None of it made sense. But the worst part was that something inside her, something deep, buried, hidden, was telling her that Michael wasn't lying. Something was wrong. Look, she said finally, rubbing her temples. Even if you're right, what am I supposed to do about it? I don't remember anything. Michael hesitated. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A small, folded photograph. He held it out to her. Anna took it cautiously, unfolding it with trembling fingers. It was old, slightly faded. A picture of a little girl standing in a backyard, smiling at the camera. Blonde hair, blue eyes. Anna's heart pounded. The girl looked exactly like her. Her gaze flickered to Michael. "Who is this?" His voice was raw with emotion. "It's you." Anna felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She looked back at the photo, at the girl's innocent smile. Something about it made her chest ache. A dull, distant pain. A memory she couldn't quite reach. Michael watched her closely. "Please," he whispered. "Just try to remember." Anna's grip tightened around the photo. She didn't understand what was happening to her. She didn't understand why she suddenly felt like she couldn't breathe. But for the first time, she was scared. Because what if he was right? What if she wasn't Anna Whitmore at all? What if she was someone else? What if she was Lily Carter? Michael took a slow, careful step forward. "You don't have to believe me right now, but promise me something." Anna swallowed hard. "What?" Michael's voice was barely above a whisper. "Promise me you'll try." Anna's hands trembled. Her mind screamed at her to push him away, to tell him he was crazy. But she couldn't, because deep down she knew the truth. Something inside her had been locked away for years, and now, for the first time, it was starting to wake up. Anna sat on the edge of her bed long after Michael had left, the small photograph still clutched tightly in her hands. She stared at it, her breath shallow, her mind spinning with thoughts she couldn't control. The little girl in the picture looked back at her, frozen in time, her innocent smile untouched by the years that had passed. The same eyes, the same dimple in her left cheek, the same small nose. But she couldn't remember. She tried. She closed her eyes, forcing herself to dig deep into the corners of her mind, to recall something, anything, that connected her to that little girl. But all she found was darkness, blankness. It was as if her life had only begun at 10 years old, as if everything before that had been erased like chalk on a board. Her stomach twisted. Michael had planted a seed of doubt inside her, and now it was growing, curling its roots around every certainty she had ever known. If what he said was true, if she had been taken, then everything she believed about herself was a lie. Her hands shook. She couldn't do this alone. She needed to talk to someone. Anna grabbed her phone and hesitated for only a moment before dialing a number she had known by heart for years. The line rang twice before a warm, familiar voice answered. "Anna, sweetheart, it's late. Are you okay?" Her throat tightened. Claire Whitmore, the woman who had raised her, the woman she had always called her mother. Anna swallowed hard. I don't know." A brief pause. Then Claire's voice softened. "Talk to me, honey." Anna squeezed the photograph between her fingers. "Do you remember when I was little?" Claire chuckled lightly. "Of course I do." "Why?" Anna hesitated. "Before I was 10. What was I like?" Silence. It lasted only a second, maybe two. But it was enough. A slow, sinking feeling spread through Anna's chest. "Sweetheart, why are you asking about that?" Claire's voice was calm, careful. Anna pressed the phone tighter to her ear. "Because I don't remember." Her voice wavered. "Because someone came to me tonight and told me that before I was 10, I was someone else." Another pause. This one longer. Then, Claire let out a soft breath. "Anna, you know better than to listen to strangers." It wasn't a stranger. A small hitch in Claire's breathing. Barely there. Anna closed her eyes. "His name is Michael Carter." Silence. For the first time in her life, Claire Whitmore sounded afraid. Anna felt something inside her crack. She had expected Claire to laugh, to dismiss it, to tell her how ridiculous the whole thing was. Instead, all she got was silence. And silence was more terrifying than denial. Anna's heart pounded. "Claire." When her mother finally spoke again, her voice was low. "Where are you right now?" "In my apartment." "Lock your doors." Anna's breath caught. "What?" "Lock your doors, sweetheart. I need to come see you." Her fingers tightened around the phone. "Claire, I'll explain everything when I get there." And then the line went dead. Anna stared at her phone, a chill creeping up her spine. Everything inside her screamed that something was very, very wrong. Michael sat in his car, parked across the street from the Whitmore Foundation, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had spent the last 3 hours gathering every bit of information he could find, following digital trails, pulling up old files. And what he found made his blood run cold. The Whitmore Foundation wasn't just involved in adoptions. It was involved in identity changes. Dozens of children had passed through their system over the years, each one with altered records. Some had come from broken homes, some from missing persons cases that were never solved. And Lily Anna was one of them. Michael clenched his jaw. They had taken his daughter and erased her, and now they were still watching her. He glanced at his watch. It was late, but he couldn't wait anymore. He had to act. Reaching for his phone, he dialed Harrison. The detective answered on the first ring. "Tell me you have something." Michael exhaled sharply. "I know how they did it. I know how they erased her." Harrison cursed under his breath. "Where are you?" "Outside Whitmore's headquarters." Harrison's voice hardened. "Michael, listen to me. If you go in there now, you'll be walking straight into their hands." Michael's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "I don't care. Damn it, Michael. This isn't just about you anymore. If you push too hard, they'll shut everything down before we can expose them. You need to be smart." Michael's jaw clenched. He hated waiting, hated sitting on his hands while his daughter was out there, believing in a life that wasn't hers. But Harrison was right. He needed more than just theories. He needed proof. He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. "Then what do we do?" Harrison was silent for a moment. Then he said, "We start with her. If she remembers, we have a case." Michael nodded slowly. "She's already starting to question things. Then that's our way in." Michael exhaled. "We don't have much time. Then let's make it count." Michael hung up and started his car. He had one more stop to make before morning. Anna paced her apartment, her mind racing. The conversation with Claire had rattled her to her core. She had always believed she could trust her mother. But now, for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure. Why hadn't Claire just told her the truth? Why had she sounded afraid? A knock at the door sent a jolt of fear through Anna's chest. She turned, hesitating. Then, slowly, she approached the door. Her fingers hovered over the lock. "Anna," a voice said from the other side. "Claire." Anna swallowed hard and unlocked the door, stepping back as Claire entered quickly. Her coat wrapped tightly around her small frame. She looked nervous, glancing around the apartment as if someone might be watching. Anna closed the door. "Tell me the truth." Claire turned to her, her face pale. Anna held up the photo Michael had given her. "Who is this?" Claire's lips parted. Then, very softly, she whispered, "You." Anna's stomach dropped. "I wanted to protect you," Claire said, her voice shaking. "I never wanted you to find out this way." Anna's throat felt tight. "Find out what?" Claire's hands trembled as she reached into her coat and pulled out a small, folded document. Anna took it cautiously. She unfolded it, and then the world around her shattered. It was a birth certificate. Her birth certificate. Only it didn't say Anna Whitmore. It said Lily Carter. Anna stumbled back, her breath coming in sharp gasps. "No," she whispered. Claire's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry." Anna's hands trembled as she clutched the paper. Her entire body felt cold, weightless, like she was falling into a void she couldn't escape. She wasn't Anna Whitmore. She was someone else. She had been taken. Claire reached out, but Anna pulled away. Her voice was barely a breath. "Who did this to me?" Claire's face crumpled. And then, in the quietest voice, she said the name that changed everything. And Anna Lily felt the ground collapse beneath her feet. Anna couldn't breathe. The name Claire had just spoken echoed in her mind, rattling through every fragile piece of reality she had clung to for years. She stared at the woman she had called her mother. But now, Claire Whitmore was a stranger. Her heart pounded so violently she thought it might stop altogether. "Say it again." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Claire swallowed hard, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I never wanted you to find out like this. Anna gripped the birth certificate so tightly the paper crumpled in her fist. Say it. Claire exhaled shakily, looking at the ground. Then, in a broken voice, she repeated the name. Daniel Whitmore. Anna's blood turned to ice. The man who had raised her. The man she had called Dad. He had taken her. Her legs felt weak, as if they couldn't support the weight of the truth pressing down on her. No, the denial slipped from her lips instinctively, her mind rejecting the words before they could settle. No, that's not possible. He loved me. He raised me. Her voice cracked, her vision blurring. Claire's face crumpled with sorrow. He did love you, sweetheart. But he was never supposed to have you. Anna shook her head violently. That doesn't make sense. Claire hesitated, gripping the back of the chair in front of her as if she needed it to stand. It was never meant to be this way. Anna's chest ached with something she couldn't name. Her entire world had been flipped upside down, and she was falling through the wreckage, unable to grasp onto anything solid. She forced herself to take a breath. Tell me everything. Claire looked at her with a deep sadness, as if she had been carrying the weight of this secret for years, waiting for the day it would finally shatter. And now that day had come. I didn't know the full truth at first, Claire admitted. When Daniel and I first got married, I knew he had secrets, things he wouldn't talk about. He was involved with people, but I never asked questions. I thought it was just business, something that didn't concern me. But then, one night, he came home with you. You were so small, so scared. I didn't ask where you came from. I didn't ask why you had no memory of your past. Her voice trembled. I just took care of you. Anna could barely hear over the roaring in her ears. You were different from the other children we had helped, Claire continued. Your case wasn't like the others. The Whitmore Foundation was supposed to help children in dangerous situations. Children who needed protection. Children who needed new identities to be safe. Anna clutched her stomach, feeling sick. But I wasn't in danger, was I? Claire's breath shuddered. No. The air was sucked out of the room. Anna felt like she might collapse. Her entire life, the foundation she had built her identity on, was a lie. Her father hadn't saved her. He had stolen her. Tears burned in the back of her throat, but she refused to let them fall. Did he erase my memories? Claire hesitated. Anna's voice turned sharp, desperate. Did he erase me? Claire closed her eyes. I don't know for sure. I just know that by the time you were 10, you had no memory of your past. I asked Daniel once. I asked him why you never talked about your childhood. And do you know what he said? Anna's hands curled into fists. Claire's voice was a whisper. He said, because some things are better forgotten. Anna's stomach twisted. Michael had been right. Someone had taken her. And that someone had been her own father. She turned away, pressing her palm against her forehead, trying to steady her breathing. The walls of her apartment felt like they were closing in, suffocating her. Where is he now? She asked. Claire hesitated. Anna turned back sharply. Where is he? Claire's lips parted. I don't know. Anna's breath caught. You don't. He disappeared 3 years ago, Claire said quickly, her voice thick with something unspoken. I haven't heard from him since. Anna shook her head. That's not possible. He wouldn't just leave. Claire hesitated again. Anna's eyes narrowed. You're lying. Claire's expression flickered. Anna, don't call me that. The words came out sharper than she intended, but they cut through the air like a knife. Claire's face paled. Anna pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart race. I need to go. Claire's eyes widened. Where? Anna didn't answer. She couldn't, because for the first time in her life, she had no idea where she belonged. She grabbed her coat and stormed out the door. Michael was sitting at his kitchen table, staring at the old case files Harrison had sent him, when his phone buzzed. A single text. We need to talk. It was from Anna. Michael's heart jumped. He immediately grabbed his keys and rushed out the door. They met at a small diner, the kind that stayed open late but never had more than 3 or 4 people inside. The lights buzzed softly, casting a dim glow over the worn-out booths and faded wallpaper. Anna was already there when Michael arrived, sitting in the farthest corner, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. He approached carefully, his chest tightening when he saw the look in her eyes. She looked lost. He sat across from her. "Talk to me." Anna let out a slow breath. "It was him." Michael frowned. "Who?" Her voice wavered. "My father." Michael's grip on the table tightened. "He took me," she whispered. "He erased my life. He made me into someone else." Michael exhaled. He had suspected it, but hearing it from her, seeing the devastation in her face, was something else entirely. She finally looked up, her blue eyes glassy. "What if I never remember?" Michael swallowed hard. "Then we'll find another way." Anna's lips pressed together. She looked like she wanted to believe him, but something was holding her back. "What if I don't want to remember?" she asked softly. Michael felt his heart crack. She wasn't just afraid of the truth. She was afraid of who she had been before. "Then I'll be here anyway," he said. "No matter what." Anna let out a shaky breath. For the first time since this started, she felt like she wasn't alone. Michael reached into his pocket and slid a small cassette tape across the table. Anna frowned. "What is this?" Michael hesitated. "Something Harrison found." His voice was careful, measured. "It's a recording from 20 years ago. A voice recording." Anna's fingers hovered over the tape. "Whose voice?" she whispered. Michael met her gaze. "Yours." Anna's breath caught. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then slowly, she picked up the tape, and with it, she held the key to everything she had forgotten. Anna's fingers trembled as she held the cassette tape. It was small, unassuming, a relic of the past she didn't remember, but it was hers. Her voice was inside it, a piece of herself that had been buried for 20 years. She swallowed hard, staring at it as if it might burn her fingers. "Where did you get this?" Michael hesitated, his gaze steady. "Harrison found it. It was in the old case files from when you disappeared. It was marked as evidence but never used." Anna's stomach twisted. "Why wasn't it used?" Michael exhaled. "Because by the time they found it, you were already gone." A chill ran down her spine. She set the tape on the table, her hands curled into fists. Her mind screamed at her to run, to pretend she had never seen it, to go back to the life she had always known. But she couldn't. Not anymore. Michael's voice was gentle. "Do you want to listen to it?" Anna hesitated. The truth was, she didn't know. What if it was worse than she imagined? What if she heard something she couldn't handle? But at the same time, what if it was the key? The key to everything? She exhaled slowly. "Not here." Michael nodded, understanding. They left the diner, the cold night air wrapping around them as they stepped outside. The streets were quiet, empty except for the occasional car passing in the distance. Michael led her to his car. "I have a tape player at my place." Anna hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Michael's apartment was small and unremarkable, the kind of place that belonged to a man who had stopped trying to make a home for himself a long time ago. The walls were bare except for a few old photos, the furniture simple and worn. It smelled faintly of coffee and paper, as if the air itself had absorbed years of late-night research and unanswered questions. Anna sat on the couch, the tape still in her hands. Michael placed an old tape recorder on the coffee table, its buttons slightly worn from use. Anna's pulse pounded in her ears as she finally placed the tape inside. She hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, she pressed play. First, there was nothing, just static. A soft hum of white noise, as if the past was waiting to reveal itself. Then, a small voice. A child's voice. Her voice. "Mommy!" Anna's breath caught. Michael tensed beside her, his eyes locked on the recorder. The voice continued, barely above a whisper. "Where are you?" "I'm scared." A lump formed in Anna's throat. She could hear the fear in the child's voice, the confusion. Then, another voice. A man's voice. Low, careful, calculated. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're going somewhere safe." Anna's stomach twisted. Michael clenched his jaw. "That's him." Anna's hands trembled. Daniel, the tape continued. But I want Mommy, the child's voice pleaded. A pause. Then the man's voice again. You don't need to worry about her anymore. Anna's chest tightened. The sound of movement. A door opening. Look at me, sweetheart, the man said softly. You're not Lily anymore. Do you understand? Anna's breath hitched. The child hesitated. Then, barely above a whisper, but that's my name. A sharp inhale from the man. Not anymore. A click. The tape stopped. Silence filled the room. Anna stared at the recorder, her pulse hammering in her ears. She felt like she was going to be sick. Michael sat still, his face unreadable, but his hands were clenched into fists. Anna swallowed hard. Her entire body felt numb. He told me to forget. Michael nodded slowly. And he made sure you did. Anna closed her eyes. There it was. Proof. The undeniable, unshakable truth. She had been taken. She had been erased. And Daniel Whitmore had done it. She pressed her hands against her face, trying to breathe, trying to think. Michael's voice was steady. Now do you believe me? Anna exhaled shakily, lowering her hands. She looked at him, her blue eyes filled with something unreadable. Yes, the single word carried 20 years of pain, of lost memories, of betrayal. Michael let out a breath, relief flickering across his face. But before he could speak, Anna did. I need to find him. Michael frowned. Anna. No, her voice was stronger now. She sat up straighter, her hands still shaking, but her gaze determined. I need to look him in the eyes and ask him why. I need to hear it from him. Michael exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. I get it, but we don't even know where he is. Anna's jaw tightened. Then we find him. Michael hesitated. Then he nodded. If Daniel Whitmore was still out there, hiding in the shadows, they would bring him into the light, and he would have to face the daughter he had stolen. The next morning, Michael met with Harrison. The detective was already sipping his second cup of coffee when Michael slid into the booth across from him. Tell me you have something, Michael said. Harrison set his cup down and leaned forward. I found him. Michael's breath caught. Harrison nodded. He's been off the grid for years, but I traced financial records. He withdrew a large sum of money from an offshore account 2 weeks ago. He slid a piece of paper across the table. And guess where it was traced back to? Michael's jaw clenched as he read the words. A cruise ship. Harrison exhaled. He's on a private cruise, set to dock in Miami in 3 days. Michael's pulse quickened. We need to get on that ship. Harrison nodded. I already booked you tickets. Michael glanced up. Harrison smirked. Don't look so surprised. I knew you wouldn't back down. Michael exhaled, nodding. And Anna? Harrison's face turned serious. You need to ask her if she's ready for this. Michael swallowed hard. He knew the answer before even asking. She was ready. She had spent 20 years living a life that wasn't hers. Now she was finally taking it back. That night, Anna packed a bag. Her hands shook as she zipped it up, but her resolve didn't waver. She wasn't the same woman she had been yesterday. She wasn't the girl Daniel Whitmore had tried to erase. She was Lily Carter, and she was going to find the man who had stolen her life. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, an expanse of deep, dark blue under the golden rays of the setting sun. The cruise ship moved steadily through the water, cutting across the waves as if it carried no weight. To the hundreds of passengers on board, it was a floating paradise, an escape from reality. But for Anna Lily, this ship wasn't a vacation. It was a battlefield. She stood at the balcony of her cabin, gripping the cold metal railing as the wind tangled through her blonde hair. Her heart was pounding. Somewhere on this massive vessel, hidden among the luxuries and laughter, was the man who had taken her. The man who had erased her past, molded her into someone else, and convinced her she had always belonged to him, and she was going to face him. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Michael was inside, pacing, his expression tense. He had insisted on coming. He wouldn't let her do this alone. We only have one shot at this, he said, running a hand over his face. Harrison was able to track Daniel's movements, but there's no guarantee we'll get close to him without him realizing what's happening. Anna turned, her arms crossed over her chest. Then we make sure he doesn't see us coming. Michael exhaled. He was still adjusting to this new side of her. The woman who had once been hesitant, lost, uncertain, now stood before him with a quiet fire in her eyes. She wasn't running anymore. She was hunting. The ship's grand hall was alive with music and conversation, laughter mingling with the clinking of wine glasses. Chandeliers cast a warm glow over the elegantly dressed passengers, their voices weaving into an intricate melody of distraction. Anna moved through the crowd with practiced ease, her heart hammering in her chest. Every step felt surreal. A week ago, she had been Anna Whitmore, a bartender in a city she barely felt connected to. Now, she was Lily Carter, a woman searching for the ghost of a man who had stolen her childhood. Michael walked beside her, his eyes scanning every face. "He's here," he murmured. Anna's fingers curled into fists. She felt it too, a presence in the air, a shadow lurking beneath the surface of the night. Then, she saw him, at the far end of the room, standing near the balcony doors. Daniel Whitmore was speaking to a group of men in tailored suits. His dark hair was streaked with gray now, his once youthful face lined with age. But his posture remained the same, calm, composed, completely in control. Her stomach twisted. She had spent 20 years carrying the image of this man in her heart as her father. And now, standing across the room, looking at him for who he really was, she felt nothing but cold, sharp betrayal. Michael tensed beside her. "What do you want to do?" Anna inhaled deeply. She could feel her pulse drumming in her throat. The easy answer was to walk over there, demand the truth, force him to look her in the eye. But that would be reckless. Daniel was a man who thrived in control. If she confronted him now, in front of people, he would find a way to twist the story, turn her confusion into a misunderstanding, make her doubt herself all over again. No, she wasn't giving him that chance. Instead, she turned away, her mind racing. "We wait." Michael frowned. "Anna, we wait," she repeated, her voice steady. "We need to get him alone." Michael exhaled but nodded. They had come too far to make a mistake now. Hours passed. The party continued, and Daniel moved effortlessly through the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, acting as though he hadn't spent the last 20 years living a lie. Anna watched from a distance, studying his movements. Every time she thought she saw a trace of guilt in his eyes, it vanished, replaced by the smooth, unreadable expression of a man who had nothing to regret. It made her sick. Finally, just past midnight, Daniel stepped away from the party, making his way toward the quieter, darker corridors of the ship. Anna's heart pounded. "This is it," she whispered. Michael gave her a firm nod. "Be careful." Anna didn't respond. She turned and followed. The hallway was quiet, the hum of the ocean the only sound as she moved down the carpeted floor. Daniel was a few steps ahead of her, his pace steady, his hands in his pockets. He had no idea she was there. Anna inhaled sharply, then spoke. "Daniel." The name left her lips like a weapon. He stopped. For a moment he didn't move, didn't turn. Then, slowly, he turned his head to look at her. His expression didn't change. No shock, no fear, just a small, unreadable smile. "Anna," he said smoothly. "Or should I say, Lily?" Her blood ran cold. He knew. He had always known. She clenched her fists. "Why did you do it?" Daniel exhaled, tilting his head slightly. "You already know the answer." Her voice hardened. "Say it." A flicker of something passed through his eyes. Amusement. "You weren't supposed to remember," he said simply. Anna's breath caught. Michael appeared at her side, his jaw tight. "You stole her," he said, his voice sharp. "You took her from her family, from her mother. You erased her life." Daniel's gaze flickered to Michael, assessing him, then back to Anna. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "I saved you." Anna's body went rigid. Michael let out a bitter laugh. You saved her. Daniel nodded, his expression calm. Lily, do you really think I took you without reason? His voice was smooth, almost hypnotic. I didn't steal you. I protected you. Anna shook her head. That's a lie. Daniel exhaled, stepping closer. Your mother. Don't talk about her, Anna snapped. Daniel studied her, then spoke again, his voice eerily quiet. She was going to give you away. Anna's breath hitched. Daniel's eyes locked onto hers, unwavering. She was going to leave you. She wanted a new life. Without you. Anna felt something crack inside her. No, she whispered. That's not true. Daniel tilted his head. Are you sure? Her throat closed. Michael stepped forward, his voice like steel. You're lying. Daniel smirked. Am I? Anna's mind spun. Doubt clawed at her. Her mother. The woman she had spent years mourning. The woman she had dreamed of finding. Could she have really wanted to leave her? Daniel saw the hesitation in her eyes and took another step forward. I raised you, Anna. I gave you a life, a future. Everything you have, everything you know. It's because of me. She felt dizzy. The walls felt too close. Michael reached for her. Anna. No, she shook her head, trying to clear the fog. She forced herself to breathe. Then slowly she met Daniel's gaze. You erased my life, she said, her voice stronger now. You lied to me. You made me believe I was someone else. But I remember now. Daniel's expression finally shifted. A flicker of something, uncertainty. Anna took a slow step forward, her voice steady. You don't control me anymore. Daniel opened his mouth. But before he could speak, a voice echoed over the ship's intercom. Attention all passengers. There has been an emergency on board. A pause. Daniel Whitmore. Please report to the main deck immediately. Daniel's jaw tightened. Anna's breath caught. Michael exhaled. It was over. They had won. The ship's intercom announcement echoed through the dimly lit hallway, each syllable hitting Anna like a jolt of electricity. Daniel Whitmore, please report to the main deck immediately. The voice was calm, professional, but to Anna, it sounded like a countdown to something inevitable. For the first time, Daniel's mask faltered. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes flickered with something close to irritation, maybe even fear. He wasn't used to being caught off guard. Anna swallowed hard, her pulse drumming in her ears. This was it. The moment everything changed. Michael's voice was steady beside her. Looks like your time's up, Daniel. Daniel exhaled slowly, adjusting the cuffs of his suit jacket like a man preparing for battle. You really think this is over? He let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head. You still don't understand, do you? Anna's jaw clenched. Then make me understand. Daniel took a step closer. Not threatening, not desperate, just calculated. His presence still held the same quiet dominance it always had, like he was the only one in control, the only one who knew the ending to the story. You were always mine, he said, voice smooth as glass. You can fight it, you can run, you can dig through the past all you want, but the truth doesn't change. I raised you, I loved you, and deep down, you know that. Anna's chest tightened. Michael's voice cut through the moment like a blade. Loving someone doesn't mean owning them. Daniel didn't even look at him. His gaze stayed locked on Anna. Do you remember when you were little? How you used to hold my hand when you were scared? How you begged me not to leave your side? His voice lowered, almost coaxing. You trusted me. Anna's breath was shaky, but she stood her ground. Because you made sure I had no one else. His jaw tightened just slightly. You took everything from me, she continued, her voice stronger now. My mother, my name, my past. You made me believe I didn't have a choice. But I do. Daniel's expression remained unreadable, but his eyes darkened. Then, in a single, chilling moment, he sighed. Not in anger, not in frustration, but as if he were disappointed. As I said, he murmured, You don't understand. He reached into his pocket. Michael tensed immediately. Anna felt her stomach tighten. But instead of a weapon, Daniel pulled out something small. Something familiar. A locket. Anna's breath hitched. She knew that locket. She didn't remember where. She didn't remember how, but she knew it. Daniel held it between his fingers, letting the dim hallway lights catch the delicate chain. His voice was almost soft. "Your mother left this behind." Anna couldn't move. Michael's jaw clenched. "What are you doing?" Daniel ignored him. He turned the locket over in his palm, his thumb brushing the gold surface as if it were something sacred. "She didn't come for you, Anna," he said. "She never did." Anna's heart pounded. "You're lying." His eyes met hers, unwavering. "Am I?" A painful silence stretched between them. The ship's intercom buzzed again. "Daniel Whitmore, report to the main deck immediately." The moment shattered. Michael grabbed Anna's wrist gently. "Come on." She hesitated. Just for a second. Just long enough to see the look in Daniel's eyes. Something unreadable, something dangerous. Then she turned and walked away. The main deck was in chaos. Crew members were speaking into radios. Passengers whispered in confused clusters, the night air thick with tension. The ship's captain stood near the railing, waiting. Michael led Anna forward, his grip firm but careful, as if he was afraid she might disappear again. Harrison was already there. He met them with a grim nod. "It's done." Anna's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Before Harrison could answer, Daniel stepped onto the deck behind them, his expression smooth, collected. "I assume this is about me?" His voice was the same calm, unshaken tone he always used, as if this were just another business deal. The captain folded his arms. "Mr. Whitmore, we've received serious allegations against you." Daniel barely reacted. "Allegations?" He let out a quiet chuckle. "By whom?" Harrison stepped forward. "By the people whose lives you've spent decades rewriting." For the first time, something flickered in Daniel's eyes. Not fear, not regret, just calculation. "You think you've won," he said smoothly. Michael's voice was sharp. "We have." Daniel glanced at Anna, just once, just enough to make her chest tighten. Then slowly he smiled, and then he raised his hands in surrender. The next few hours blurred together. Daniel was taken into custody. The Whitmore Foundation was under immediate investigation. The weight of 20 years of stolen lives, of fabricated identities, was finally crashing down. Anna sat on the edge of her cabin's bed, staring at the locket Daniel had given her. She hadn't meant to take it, but somehow it had ended up in her pocket. She turned it over in her hands. She should throw it away. She should burn it. But instead, she slowly, hesitantly, opened it. Inside, there was a photograph. A woman. Anna's breath hitched. It was her mother. For the first time, she remembered. The way her mother used to hum a lullaby while brushing her hair. The way she smelled like vanilla and old books. The way she would whisper, "I love you, Lily," right before turning off the lights. Her throat tightened. She hadn't left her. She had never left her. Daniel had lied. Again. A shaky breath escaped her lips. Michael's voice was quiet from the doorway. "Are you okay?" Anna wiped her eyes quickly and nodded. "I think so." Michael stepped inside, watching her carefully. "It's over now." She exhaled slowly. "No," she turned the locket in her fingers one last time. "It's just beginning." Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" Anna closed the locket, feeling a strange, unfamiliar sense of clarity. "There's still so much I don't remember." She looked up at him, her eyes steady. "And I want to know everything." Michael nodded slowly. "You will." Anna inhaled deeply, standing. For the first time in 20 years, she wasn't afraid. For the first time in 20 years, she knew exactly who she was. She wasn't Anna Whitmore. She wasn't a girl without a past. She was Lily Carter, and she was finally going home.